Dad, sign. This money will be ours sooner or later.
Please, Dad, just sign it. Tiana's voice was smooth, coaxing, almost like when she was a little girl begging me for a dollar to buy candy. But now she was 35, and her hand pushed mine down toward a pen while her husband, Darius, clamped onto my arm with a grip that ground into my bones. We were sitting in a bank in Oakland, California, with people around us conducting ordinary business, blind to the storm breaking at our table. It's nothing, Dad. Just a routine transfer to clear up some papers. But I had already read the forms. It wasn't routine. It wasn't small. It was everything. My $55,000 in savings. All I had left after my wife Ruth passed 3 years ago. The air conditioning hummed above, but my shirt stuck to my back with sweat. The bright lights made my eyes ache, and the clicking of cash counters pounded in my skull. Tiana's smile beamed for the security cameras, a picture of normality. Darius grinned too, but his fingers dug deeper, a vise dressed up as affection. "Come on, Marcus," he murmured, his breath sour with smoke and bitter coffee. "Don't make this ugly. Think of your granddaughter, Maya. Think of all we've done for you, done for me." The words almost choked me. I had covered Tiana's college tuition. I had put down the first payment on their house. I had cleared Darius's gambling debts last year, $25,000 I never saw again. And now, the last of what Ruth and I had saved over nearly 5 decades together was about to vanish under my trembling hand. The pen shook as I held it, the ink looking like a final verdict on the page. One signature and it would all be gone. Tiana leaned closer, her voice syrupy, her eyes calculating. "Dad, you can't manage this much money at your age. Let us help." Each word was sugar covering poison. I glanced around the bank in desperation. The young teller was busy with another customer. An older woman flipped through a pamphlet, waiting in line. A man in a suit scrolled on his phone. No one noticed. No one realized a robbery was happening here in plain sight, dressed up as family business. Darius's grip tightened. A strangled sound escaped me before he hissed through a forced smile. "Keep quiet. We don't want a scene." His eyes were colder than steel, and in that instant, I understood he could do anything. Tiana, my only daughter, the child I had carried on my shoulders, the girl I had worked myself to the bone for, sat there watching him hurt me and did nothing. The clock on the wall read 3:15 p.m. on a Tuesday, a day that should have been ordinary but had turned into the darkest hour of my life. I thought back to the call that morning. "Dad, we need you to come to the bank," Tiana had said, her tone urgent but hollow. "There are papers you have to sign." She never gave details, only commands disguised as requests. Then the branch manager, Mr. Alvarez, walked over with a professional smile. "Everything all right here. Need any assistance?" His presence sparked a flicker of hope. My one chance. My chest hammered as I scribbled a quick note on the edge of paper. "Help. They are forcing me. I don't want to sign." I slipped it toward him while Tiana and Darius looked at the documents. Mr. Alvarez's eyes flicked to the note, widened, and his face shifted from neutrality to controlled alarm. Without a word, he pressed the hidden button under his desk, the silent alarm. For the first time all day, my heart steadied. Someone was going to intervene. But to understand how I came to be this desperate old man in a bank, pleading without words for someone to save me, you must know the whole story. My name is Marcus Bennett. I am 70 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I have been the man who always said yes, the man who gave, who worked, who sacrificed for his family, especially for Tiana. I remember the day she was born as clearly as if it were yesterday. A bright spring morning, 12 hours of labor, and then she arrived, small, perfect, with her mother's green eyes. I held her tiny body and swore she would never go without, that I would protect and provide for her always. I kept that vow for 35 years, perhaps too well. When she was 5, Ruth and I both worked double shifts to buy her the red bicycle she longed for on her birthday. $200, an enormous sum for us then, but worth it for the joy in her smile. At 15, she wanted a summer camp that cost $1,500. I sold my father's old tools to make it happen. When she graduated high school, she wept, insisting she had to attend a private university. "Dad, it's my dream," she pleaded. "I can't settle for a state school." And I gave. Every time I gave. What will my friends think? The tuition was $45,000 a year. $45,000 we didn't have. Ruth and I took out a loan against the house. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital maintenance wing, mopping floors and fixing leaks late into the night, my back screaming, my knees stiff. Also, Tiana could earn her degree. She graduated with honors in business administration, and I wept at the ceremony, believing I had finally done my duty as a father. I thought I could rest, but Tiana had other plans. At 25, she met Darius at a dimly lit bar. He was sharp-looking, I admit that. But there was something unsettling in his eyes, calculated, watchful. The very first thing he asked me when we met was whether the house was paid off. Not a word of courtesy, just money. That should have been the warning I needed. Their wedding cost $55,000. "Dad, I'll only get married once," Tiana pleaded. I want it to be perfect. I wanted to argue to say we couldn't afford it. That Ruth had just been diagnosed with diabetes and medication would drain our savings. But I saw her joy, her excitement, and I couldn't bring myself to say no. We borrowed again. And yes, the wedding was beautiful. Tiana glowed in her lace gown like something out of a fairy tale. Darius smiled too, but his eyes were busy scanning the wealthier guests, measuring, calculating. After their honeymoon in Europe, another 5,000 we covered because they insisted they couldn't possibly skip it. They moved into a small apartment. For 6 months I let myself believe they had finally grown up, that they would stand on their own feet. But then the calls began. Dad, the refrigerator broke. Dad, the car needs repairs. Dad, Darius lost his job. We can't cover rent. Every crisis was urgent. Every ask sounded desperate. And I always said yes. 500 here, 1,000 there. Bits and pieces that slowly chipped away at my peace of mind. 2 years into their marriage, Tiana told me they wanted to buy a house. It's an investment, Dad, a step toward our future. The house cost $210,000 and they needed $45,000 for the down payment. They had nothing saved, of course. Their credit was wrecked, of course. Could you help us, Dad? Just the down payment. We'll pay back every cent, I promise. That was the grandest promise Tiana ever made, and the most hollow. I pulled $45,000 from the retirement account I had built over 20 years. Every dollar represented hours of labor, meals I skipped, clothes I never bought, vacations I never took. I sat in the bank signing early withdrawal papers with shaking hands while the officer explained the penalty. 10%, $4,500 gone instantly. Are you sure about this, sir? He asked me gently. Once you withdraw, you can't reverse it. I told him yes. It was for my daughter, for her future, for the security I had never known. I left the bank with the check, feeling like a rescuer. I was about to make my child's American dream real when I handed it to her. Tiana cried tears of joy, I thought. You're the best dad in the world, she said, hugging me. I promise, Dad, I'll pay you back every dollar with interest. Darius looked touched as well, but his embrace was hollow. Thanks, Marcus, he muttered. This means a lot to us. They moved in 3 months later. The house was lovely, I can't deny it. 2 stories, 4 bedrooms, a backyard wide enough for a pool. At the housewarming, I walked through each room with pride. My sacrifice had not been in vain, or so I thought, but the phone calls didn't stop. If anything, they multiplied. Dad, we need furniture. We can't keep living on the floor. $10,000 for living room set. Dad, the fence needs replacing. The neighbors are complaining. $3,000 for lumber and labor. Dad, the kitchen is ancient. The stove barely works. $8,000 for new setup. Each time I hesitated. Each time I reminded her that money doesn't just appear out of thin air. Tiana pressed the right buttons. Dad, I thought you'd want us to have a good life. I thought you'd want Maya to grow up in a proper home. And Maya, my granddaughter, 8 years old then, the joy of my days, became Tiana's most powerful weapon. Maya was born when Tiana was 27. From the first time I held her, I knew she was different. She had Ruth's curious eyes and a smile that could soften stone. More than that, she had something her mother seemed to have misplaced along the way, genuine kindness. When Maya visited me, she brought crayon drawings from school, little stick figures of me, arms outstretched, always smiling, always strong. To her, I was a giant. To her, I was still a hero. I raised you big because your love is big, Maya, she would say in that small, earnest voice. It was impossible to refuse anything that centered on Maya. Ballet lessons $220 a month. Piano lessons $330 a month. Summer camp $2,600. Costumes for recitals $550 each. Maya has talent, Tiana would insist. We cannot let her gifts fade for lack of money. Meanwhile, my own finances were unraveling. Ruth's condition worsened after her diabetes diagnosis. Her prescriptions ran $420 every month and insurance covered only a portion. She needed specialty injections, frequent visits to the clinic, and a diet that required pricier groceries. I worked double shifts at the hospital, mopping and hauling trays, coming home with raw feet and a back that complained louder every day, only to cook, clean, and look after Ruth. Why don't you ask Tiana for help? Aunt Ruth suggested during one of her visits. You have spent well over $110,000 on them in the past 5 years. Sure, she can pitch in for medical bills. But I could not bring myself to ask my daughter for money. It had always been my role to shoulder the burden, not the other way around. I was supposed to be the steady one, the pillar. Ruth passed on an early Tuesday morning 3 years after her diagnosis. I held her hand as she went, and a piece of me went with her. 46 years of marriage, a lifetime of shared decisions and small compromises. After the funeral in our quiet house, I discovered I was nearly penniless. Medical costs combined with everything I had given away had drained the account. My life insurance payout came through for $60,000. It was what remained for my years ahead. I put it into savings and swore to myself I would be careful. I would learn to say no. But Tiana had other ideas. 2 months after the funeral, Darius lost his job at a construction outfit. It was his supervisor, Tiana told me over the phone, sounding injured and indignant. He fired him without cause. Now they could not cover the mortgage. Maya might have to change schools. The thought of that ripped me up inside. They asked for $22,000 to tide them over while Darius looked for work. 6 months, they promised. We will return every cent with interest, they vowed. It was nearly 2/3 of what I had left, but the image of Maya losing her home felt like a knife. I gave them the money. Darius found work 3 months later, but the repayment never arrived. Each time I brought it up, there was an excuse. We are paying off old bills, Mom. The car cost more than we expected. Maya needed dental work the insurance refused to cover. Now I sat in this bank, watching them try to take the last $33,000 from me. My own daughter sat beside her husband, smiling for the cameras, while he gripped my arm and plotted to leave me destitute. Mr. Alvarez returned to our table, flanked by two security officers who tried to look casual but carried tension in their shoulders. Tiana and Darius were still hunched over the papers, eyes darting like scavengers measuring their prize. "Excuse me," Mr. Alvarez said in a voice both calm and firm. "I need to verify some details before we proceed with this transfer." For the first time I saw unease in Darius' eyes. "Everything is in order," he answered sharply. "My mother wishes to transfer the funds to her daughter's account. It is family business." His hand still held my arm, but with less cruelty now, aware of onlookers. "I understand," Mr. Alvarez replied. "However, bank procedure requires me to confirm that every party is acting voluntarily and free from undue pressure." His words cut through the fog of my fear like lightning. He looked me straight in the face. Mr. Alvarez asked if I would accompany him to his office for private verification. "For transactions of this amount, it is standard." Tiana stiffened. "That is unnecessary," she protested. "My mother has already decided, right, Mom?" Her smile had become brittle. "Like an act badly rehearsed. We can finish everything right here. We do not want to inconvenience anyone." But Mr. Alvarez was already on his feet, offering his hand. "It is bank policy," he said. "No exceptions." The guards moved into place, positioned discreetly but clearly. "It will only take a few minutes." My legs trembled as I rose, and for the first time that afternoon Darius had to release his hold on my arm. Tiana took my free hand. "Dad, don't make this any harder," she whispered. "Just sign and we can go home. Meyer is waiting for us." She used my granddaughter's name like a master key, hoping it would unlock whatever stubbornness I had left. I mumbled, "I'll be right back," afraid to meet Tiana's eyes. If I saw her face, that innocent look she kept for the world, I might cave once more. Mr. Alvarez's office was modest but welcoming, with framed photos of his family lined across the desk and a small cactus soaking up sunlight in the window. He closed the door and sat across from me. "Mr. Bennett," he began quietly, "tell me what's really happening here." And then, like a dam bursting, it all came pouring out. I told him about the years of manipulation, about the money I had poured out without ever seeing a single dollar return, about the broken promises wrapped in lies. I told him how Darius had gripped my arm hard enough to leave marks, how Tiana had used Maya's name as leverage to break me down. I explained that those $33,000 were all I had left, and without them, I could end up with nothing to live on. Mr. Alvarez listened patiently, nodding as he scribbled notes. When I finished, he exhaled heavily. "Sir, what you're describing is financial coercion. In some cases, it qualifies as elder abuse. What your daughter and son-in-law are doing is unlawful." Unlawful. The word echoed inside me. For years I had convinced myself it was my duty as a father to give until I had nothing left. It had never crossed my mind that Tiana's actions could carry a legal name. That what she was doing was not just selfish but criminal. "What can I possibly do?" I asked, my voice cracking. "She's my daughter. I don't want to destroy her life, but I cannot survive like this. I have nothing left to give." Mr. Alvarez leaned forward. "First, we'll cancel this transaction. Second, I'll document everything you've told me. Third, I'll provide you with information on legal and protective resources available to seniors." He paused. "But the most important step is yours. Are you prepared to say no? Are you ready to draw boundaries, even if it angers your daughter?" The question struck me deep. Was I ready? For 70 years, I had been the man who always said yes, the man who worked, sacrificed, and gave until there was nothing left. If I stopped being that man, who would I be? I thought of Ruth, how she had labored beside me until her last breath to keep our family afloat. I remembered the months I had lived on beans so I could cover Tiana's private school tuition. I remembered nights spent hunched over bills, clipping coupons, stretching every dollar until it screamed. And then I thought of Maya, my granddaughter, watching her mother manipulate her grandfather, learning that love could be bought, that using those who loved you was acceptable, that older people were simply resources to exploit. "Yes," I said finally, and to my surprise, my voice was steady. "I'm ready." Mr. Alvarez gave a small smile and began writing. "Good. I'll place alerts on all your accounts. No one will move money without your presence and extra verification. Here's the number for the Elder Abuse Hotline. And here," he handed me a small card, "is my direct extension. If they pressure or threaten you again, call me right away." I accepted the papers with hands that no longer shook. What do I tell them now? How do I explain that I won't sign? "Tell them the truth," he said firmly. "That you are keeping your money for yourself. You owe no other explanation. It's yours, you earned it, you saved it. And you have every right to hold on to it." I took a deep breath. It was time to face my daughter, time to be a man who could finally say no, time to start living for myself, even if it meant breaking a lifetime habit. We walked out of the office together. Tiana rushed toward us, her face a mask of unease and concealed fury. "What took so long, Dad? We're late." I looked at my daughter, this 35-year-old woman who had built her entire life on my inability to refuse her, and for the first time in decades, I spoke the words that would alter everything. "I'm not going to sign, Tiana. I'm not transferring my money." The silence was suffocating. Tiana stared at me as if I had struck her, her green eyes flashing with shock and anger I had never seen before. Darius jumped up so abruptly his chair nearly toppled, fists clenched tight at his sides. "What do you mean you're not signing?" Tiana demanded, her voice trembling, still wearing a forced smile for the bank cameras. "Dad, we already discussed this. It's only temporary." "It's not temporary, Tiana," I answered in a tone that startled even me. It was firm, decisive, the voice of a man who had finally found his backbone after a lifetime of letting others bend it. "And it's not a transfer. It's my retirement savings. And I'm keeping it." Darius stepped closer, but the security guards moved instantly, forming a barrier between us. "Marcus," he said, using that softened voice he reserved for manipulation, "don't be foolish. What are you going to do with all that money? You don't have major expenses. We can invest it, multiply it, and secure a future for the whole family." "For the whole family," I repeated, and a dry, bitter laugh slipped from my throat. "Like when you invested the $45,000 I gave you for your house down payment, or the $22,000 I handed over when you lost your job. Tell me, Darius, how much of that have you paid back?" His mask cracked. The false concern vanished, and I saw the cold calculation that had always been there. "Those were gifts," he hissed through clenched teeth. "I never said that," I shot back, the words burning on my tongue. "You promised repayment. You promised it was temporary. You promised many things you never honored." Tiana began to cry, but they were not the raw tears of a child who had scraped her knee. These were practiced tears designed to weaken me. "Dad, I can't believe you're doing this. After everything we've shared, after all the love we've given you." "Love," I spat the word. "You call it love when your husband bruises my arm. You call it love when you trick me into coming here to strip me of everything. That isn't love, that's theft." Heads began to turn. An older woman in line watched intently. A young man in a suit put his phone away to stare at us. Tiana realized the attention she was drawing and lowered her voice, though her desperation only sharpened. "All right," she whispered, wiping at her tears. "Don't transfer it all, just half. 10,000 is enough to get us through." "What crisis, Tiana?" I asked, and the question stunned her. "Darius is working again. You own a home. What emergency demands my retirement fund?" Her silence said everything, and in that silence I finally recognized the truth I had avoided. There was no emergency. There never had been. It was a pattern, a life built around my inability to say no. They spent more than they earned because they knew I would always close the gap. "You're 35 years old," I continued. "Your husband is 38. Both of you hold college degrees I paid for. You both work. It's time you learn to live within your means." "What about Maya?" Darius cut in, playing his strongest card. "What about your granddaughter? Will you let her suffer because her grandfather turned selfish?" The word selfish stung. All my life I had dreaded being seen that way. I had given up my wants, my comfort, my dreams, anything to avoid that label. But standing there in that bank with my last 33,000 about to be taken, the truth hit me. This wasn't selfishness. This was survival. "Maya will not suffer," I said firmly. "You will continue to provide for her, just like millions of parents do every day. What you will not do is use her as a weapon against me." Mr. Alvarez cleared his throat. "Mr. and Mrs. Cole, you need to leave, Mr. Bennett has made it very clear he does not consent to this transaction. Continued pressure qualifies as harassment." "She's my father," Tiana snapped. "I have every right to talk to him." "Not when you're intimidating him on bank property," Mr. Alvarez replied. He nodded toward the guards. "They'll escort you out." Tiana looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't disappointment. It was pure distilled hatred, shaped by years of resentment. "Fine, Dad," she said, her voice cold as stone. "If that's what you want. But don't come begging when you're alone in that house with no one visiting you, no one to care for you. And don't call when you're sick," Darius added sharply. "Don't call when you can't handle the stairs. We're not your caretakers." Their words were crafted to scare me, to make me picture a future of loneliness and helplessness, and for a moment I felt a shiver of fear. What if I did fall ill? What if this choice cost me my family? But then I remembered something Ruth once said before she passed. We had been watching a program on scams that preyed on seniors. She turned to me and said, "Marcus, fear is the strongest weapon manipulators have. They make you imagine every terrible thing that could happen if you don't obey. But most of those things never come true, and if they do, you face them when they arrive, not before." "I understand," I told Tiana, my voice sounding steadier than the storm inside me. "If that's the choice you've made, so be it. But I won't change mine out of fear of what might come later." The guards stepped closer. "Sir, it's time to go," one of them said firmly but professionally. Tiana snatched her purse with jerky, angry movements. "This isn't over, Dad. We'll talk at home when these strangers aren't filling your head with nonsense." "No," I replied, and the word came out stronger than I expected. "We're not going to talk about this at home, not until you can accept my decision without trying to twist it." They walked out without a backward glance. Darius kept a hand on Tiana's back, whispering something in her ear that made her shoulders tighten even more. Through the bank's front windows, I watched them cross the lot, two silhouettes moving away, carrying with them years of manipulation and control. When they were gone, I lowered myself into a chair in the waiting area. My legs trembled, not from fear but from the release of decades of pent-up strain. I had done something I never imagined I could do. I had told my daughter no. I had chosen my own well-being over her demands. Mr. Alvarez came and sat beside me. How do you feel? He asked quietly. I thought for a long moment. Afraid, I admitted, but also free, like I can finally breathe after holding my breath for years. The days that followed were the hardest of my life, not because I longed for Tiana or Darius, but because I had to face the truth of who I had been all this time. I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by family photos that now seemed to mock me from their golden frames. I asked myself questions I had buried for decades. When had I lost my voice? When had I stopped being Marcus Bennett and become nothing more than Tiana's father? The phone began ringing that very night. Her name flashed across the screen every hour. I didn't answer. On the second day, the text messages started. Dad, I know you're upset, but we need to talk. Dad, Maya keeps asking about you. She's heartbroken. Dad, Darius says he's sorry if he hurt you. He didn't mean it. Each message was a needle of guilt, trying to pierce the armor of resolve I was building. On the third day, they came to my door. I saw them through the curtains, Tiana in a yellow dress she knew I liked, Darius wearing his best fake smile, and Maya clutching both their hands. My granddaughter carried a drawing, probably another of her pictures of me as a giant grandpa with huge arms. My chest ached at the sight, but I did not open the door. Tiana pressed the bell for 10 straight minutes, then began pounding. Dad, I know you're in there. The car is in the driveway. Please, we just want to talk. Her voice grew more desperate with every plea. Maya misses you. Look, she made you a drawing. I heard my granddaughter's small voice through the door. Why won't Grandpa open it, Mommy? Did I do something bad? Her question nearly shattered me. I almost ran to unlock the door, almost slipped back into the old cycle. But then I remembered Mr. Alvarez's warning. Fear and guilt are the greatest weapons manipulators have. I backed away from the window, retreating to my bedroom. I turned on the little radio Ruth had given me on our 30th anniversary, let classical music fill the room, and tried to drown out their voices. After an hour, they left. That night, my younger sister Aunt Ruth called. Marcus, Tiana told me what happened at the bank. She says you've become paranoid, that you think they're trying to steal from you. Her tone carried that condescending edge she used when she thought I was losing perspective. She says they just wanted to help you invest smarter. Is that true? Is that what she told you? I asked, bitterness creeping into my voice. Did she also mention that her husband bruised my arm, that I had to slip a secret note to the bank manager asking for protection? Silence stretched. He really hurt you, she whispered at last. He really did, I answered. And Tiana stood there and let it happen. The words came easier now, more solid each time I spoke them. Ruth, they've taken over $110,000 from me in the past decade. They've never returned a cent, and now they wanted the last $33,000 I have left. But Marcus, she said gently, she's your daughter. Families help each other. Families do help each other, I agreed. But this wasn't help, this was exploitation. There's a difference between lending a hand and being treated like a personal ATM. After we hung up, I realized even those who cared for me could not fully see what I had endured. They saw the checks and transfers, but not the manipulation behind them. They saw the generosity, but not the threats veiled as requests. How could I explain years of subtle abuse to someone who had only glimpsed the surface? On the fourth day, Maya showed up at my door alone. My heart froze when I spotted her through the glass, still in her school uniform. Pink backpack slung over her shoulders, standing on my porch as if nothing had changed. This time, I did open the door, because I knew an 8-year-old child wasn't responsible for her parents' manipulations. Hi, Grandpa, Maya said, flashing that smile bright enough to light up a whole city. Mom says you're mad at us, but I didn't do anything wrong, did I? I bent down to her level, swallowing the lump in my throat. No, sweetheart, you did nothing wrong. Grandpa isn't angry with you. Then why don't you come visit anymore? Why don't you answer when Mom calls from home? Her green eyes, so much like Tiana's but filled with innocence, searched my face in confusion. Maya, I said carefully, sometimes adults have problems they need to work through. But that doesn't mean I don't love you. I will always love you. Can I come in? I made you a new drawing. She held up a paper she had pressed to her chest. I let her inside, and we sat in the living room while she explained her picture. Like all the others, I was a giant figure with long arms. But this time, something was different. The grandfather in the drawing looked sad. Why is Grandpa sad here? I asked. Because Mommy says you're sad. She says some bad men at the bank told you things that confused you. Her serious little eyes looked older than her years. Is it true there are bad men, Grandpa? That was when I realized Tiana had already rewritten the story, casting me as a confused old man tricked by outsiders. It was clever, by feeding this story to Maya. She controlled the narrative and set the stage for future manipulation. There are no bad men, Maya, I said firmly. The men at the bank helped me when I needed it. Then why does Mommy say? Sometimes, I interrupted gently. Adults see the same thing differently. Like when you and a friend look at a cloud, you say it's a cat, she says it's a dog. You're both looking at the same cloud, but you see it differently. She nodded as if that made perfect sense. We spent an hour coloring together, and for a short while I pretended nothing had changed. But when it was time for her to leave, because I knew Tiana would soon come for her, Maya asked me a question that broke my heart. Grandpa, are you not going to give me money for ballet classes anymore? There it was. At only 8 years old, Maya had already begun to link my love to my money. She had already absorbed the lesson Tiana drilled into her, that Grandpa was valuable for what he provided, not for who he was. Maya, I said, kneeling to meet her eyes again. Do you love me because I give you money, or do you love me because I'm your grandpa? She looked puzzled. I love you because you're my grandpa, but money is good too. Mommy says that's why you're the best, because you always help us when we need things. And in that moment, I understood the deepest damage I had done. By giving without limits, I hadn't just allowed Tiana to become dependent and manipulative. I had taught my granddaughter that love could be measured in dollars, that family was transactional. Maya, I said gently, I love you for who you are, not for what I can give. Real love can't be bought with money. Do you understand? She nodded, but I could tell the words hadn't yet taken root. She was too young, too conditioned by her mother's version of love. When Tiana arrived, she didn't step out of the car. She simply honked from the driveway as if I were a stranger babysitting her child. Maya waved goodbye, then vanished behind tinted glass. That night, sitting alone in my living room, I realized I had lost more than money through the years. I had lost my voice, my identity, and the ability to have genuine relationships. But I also realized something else. For the first time in decades, I had the chance to reclaim all of it. A week after the bank incident, as I was growing used to the strange silence without Tiana's constant calls, I had an unexpected visitor. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was watering the garden plants Ruth had loved so much when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a young woman I didn't immediately recognize, tall brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, a nervous smile that stirred something familiar. When I opened the door, I realized it wasn't Maya. It was my great-niece, the daughter of my sister Aunt Ruth's son, Arthur. My name is Caroline, she said softly but with determination. Not your granddaughter, Maya, but your great-niece. I've come because I think you need to hear something. I know we don't really know each other, she said, but I had to come speak with you. Arthur. The name stirred faint memories of a nephew I had last seen at family gatherings long ago before work took him north and he lost touch with the family. Please come in, I said, stepping aside. Would you like some tea? We sat in my living room, and this other Caroline explained why she had come. My dad told me what happened at the bank. Aunt Ruth told him everything, and he asked me to visit you. She paused, weighing her words. You see, Mr. Bennett, I went through something very similar with my own mother. Her story unfolded slowly while the tea cooled in our cups. Her mother, Arthur's ex-wife, had developed a gambling addiction after the divorce. For years, she had manipulated Caroline out of her part-time wages, her college savings, even forged her signature on student loans. It was always an emergency, she said. Always the last time. Always with a promise to pay me back. Just a little more time, she'd say. And what did you do? I asked, though I already sensed the answer. At first, nothing. She was my mother. I thought being a good daughter meant unconditional help. Her voice carried a sharp edge I knew too well. But then I realized it wasn't love she wanted. It was survival, hers at my expense. She told me how she eventually cut contact for 2 years, enduring desperate calls, guilt-drenched messages, even false threats of suicide. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, she admitted, but it saved me. And now, I asked. Better, she said with a faint but honest smile, because I set clear boundaries and refused to move them. Now we have a relationship, but it's real. She knows not to ask me for money. She knows lying or manipulating means I disappear again. And without money in the middle, we found out there was actual love underneath. Her words gave me something I hadn't felt since that day in the bank, hope. Do you think it's possible? I asked quietly. Do you think Tiana and I could ever have a genuine relationship? I don't know, Caroline answered truthfully. It depends on whether she's willing to change, but what I do know is this: you must keep your boundaries, no matter how painful it feels. She told me about a support group that met Tuesday evenings at the downtown library for people who have experienced financial abuse from their own families. At first, I thought it sounded silly. I didn't see myself as a victim. But when I went, I realized there were dozens just like me, parents, grandparents, siblings, all manipulated by the people closest to them. Before she left, Caroline gave me a long, steady hug. Mr. Bennett, what you did at that bank was brave. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting yourself. That week went by quickly. For the first time in years, I began doing small things just for me. I read books I had always wanted to read. I walked through the park where Ruth and I used to stroll on Sunday mornings. I cooked meals I liked, not the ones I knew Tiana preferred when she visited. By Tuesday night, I made the choice to attend the support group. The library was quiet, and in a small back room, 12 people sat in a circle, men and women of all ages, though most were over 50. The facilitator, a woman named Sandra, welcomed me and said I could introduce myself only if I felt ready. I listened first, story after story that echoed my own. A 70-year-old woman whose son had stolen $100,000 by forging her checks. A 60-year-old man who mortgaged his house 3 times for his brother's gambling debts. A woman my age whose daughter convinced her to sign over the deed to her home, only to sell it without a word. When my turn came, the words poured out like a river finally finding the sea. I told them about Tiana, about the years of manipulation, about the day at the bank. I braced myself for judgment, for someone to tell me I'd been naive. But instead I found understanding. I found validation. I found people who had lived my exact story. Financial abuse by family is one of the hardest to recognize, Sandra said afterward, because it hides behind love, duty, and guilt. The abuser knows exactly which buttons to press to make us feel unreasonable. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel unreasonable at all. A woman named Eleliner, who had been part of the group for 2 years, gave me the most valuable advice. Marcus, you are going to doubt yourself 1,000 times. You'll ask if you were too harsh, if you overreacted, if you should just call your daughter and apologize. Those doubts will come. But whenever they do, remember how you felt in that bank. Remember the fear, the physical pain, the desperation. Those feelings don't lie. That night, when I got home, there were 3 voicemails waiting from Tiana. I listened to them, and for the first time, I could hear the manipulation as if a fog had finally lifted. Dad, Maya keeps asking for you every day. She's depressed. She doesn't understand why her grandpa doesn't want to see her. Dad, Darius and I have been talking. We think you should see a doctor. This behavior isn't normal for you. Dad, I'm starting to think you may be having memory issues. Have you considered that it might be dementia? Each message was another tactic. First, use Maya as a shield. Second, attack my judgment. Third, suggest that I was losing my mind. It was like a manual of psychological manipulation, executed step by step. I deleted them all without replying. The next morning, as I was making breakfast, the phone rang again. A number I didn't recognize appeared, so I answered, thinking it could be important. Grandpa. It was Maya, her real 8-year-old voice. Mommy borrowed her work phone because you don't answer when we call from home. My heart clenched. Hello, sweetheart. How are you? I'm okay, but I miss you so much. When are you going to come visit? When are we going to the park again like before? Little voice carried such sadness that I felt my resolve weakening. Maya, I said carefully, Grandpa loves you very much, but right now your mom and I have some problems we need to work through. But are you going to fix it soon? My birthday is in 2 months, and I wanted to ask you for something special. There it was again. Even in what seemed like an innocent conversation, the expectation of money surfaced. What did you want, my love? I asked gently. New dress for my ballet recital. Mommy says it costs $200 and we don't have the money this month. And there it was, the real reason for the call. Tiana had sent her own child to do what she could no longer do directly. She had turned her daughter into a messenger for her demands. Maya, I said, my heart breaking but my voice firm, let me speak to your mother. There was silence, then I heard Tiana's voice in the background. Give the phone to Mommy. Sweetheart, when Tiana came on, her tone was different. Gone was the frantic desperation. Now it was cold, calculated, planned. Hello, Dad. Maya wanted to call you because she misses you. She's been so sad since you decided to cut us out of your life. Every word was loaded with accusation. Tiana, I interrupted. You know perfectly well I haven't cut Maya out of my life. I've set boundaries with you and with Darius. Maya can visit me whenever she wants. But you will not use her to manipulate me. Manipulate you. Her voice rose, feigning outrage. Dad, Maya just needs a dress for her recital. That's a normal thing any grandfather would want to do. Since when is helping your own family manipulation? It became manipulation. I answered with a clarity that startled even me. The moment you sent your 8-year-old to ask me for money, after I told you I wasn't going to keep funding your lifestyle. There was a long pause, and then finally the mask slipped. You know what, Dad, you're right. Yes, I told Maya to ask you for the dress. And do you know why? Because you've always been the grandpa who gives. You've always been the one who makes the extras possible. And now, out of nowhere, you've decided not to be that man anymore. How am I supposed to explain that to her? You explain, I said, feeling a new strength pulse through me, that grandfathers can love without handing out money. You explain that healthy families don't build love on transactions. You explain that you and Darius are responsible for your daughter's needs. Her needs. Tiana laughed, but it was a bitter, sharp laugh. Dad, we live paycheck to paycheck. Darius makes enough for the basics, but the extras, the things that make Maya's childhood special, have always depended on you, and you knew it. You liked being the hero, the savior, the one who made dreams possible. Her words struck me like a slap because there was truth in them. For years, I had tied my sense of purpose and self-worth to solving their financial problems. I felt proud whenever Tiana introduced me to her friends and said, my dad is always there for us. I had enjoyed being seen as generous, dependable, the patriarch who could resolve any crisis with a check. You're right, I admitted, and I could hear Tiana's surprise at my answer. I did like being the hero. I liked feeling needed, feeling valuable to you. But do you realize what that did to both of us? It turned you into someone who can't handle her own problems without begging for money, and it turned me into a man who questioned whether he was loved unless he was giving. Don't say that, Tiana murmured, but the conviction was gone from her voice. It's the truth, my daughter, and the worst part is we're teaching the same thing to Maya. She's growing up thinking family love comes with a price, that relationships are sustained through financial transactions. Silence followed. Then Tiana said something that pierced my heart. So what am I supposed to do now, Dad? How am I going to pay for the dress? How am I going to explain to Maya that she can't be in the recital because we don't have the money? For the first time in our exchange, I heard genuine vulnerability. It wasn't performance. It was the real fear of a mother who had become so dependent that she no longer knew how to function without my support. "Tiana," I said gently, "have you thought about speaking with the ballet school? They often have assistance programs or used costumes they can lend. Have you considered selling things you don't use anymore? Have you looked into part-time work?" "It's not that easy, Dad. It's not that easy." "I know it's not easy," I said, "but it's possible. Millions of families face these challenges every day without asking their aging parents to bankroll them." "But you're not just any aging parent," Tiana pressed. "You have money. You have the means to help us. Why is it so wrong that we want a little help?" "Because it's not a little help, Tiana. In the past 10 years, you've asked me for over $100,000 and you've never paid back a single cent." My voice grew firmer. "And because the help has always come tied with manipulation, lies, and now even physical intimidation. Darius didn't mean to hurt you. He was just nervous, that's all. He grabbed my arm so hard he left bruises. And you saw it and did nothing. That silence was agreement, Tiana. That inaction was complicity." The image of that moment in the Brooklyn bank came back to me with brutal clarity. Darius's hand gripping my arm, desperation in his eyes, and my daughter standing by. Our conversation dragged on another 20 minutes, but it felt as though we were speaking different languages. Tiana saw my boundaries as selfishness. I saw her persistence as abuse. She saw my years of generosity as proof I should continue. I saw them as proof I had allowed a toxic cycle to take root. When we finally hung up, nothing was resolved. I sat in my kitchen with a heavy mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness, because I realized our relationship might not survive unless one of us changed completely. Relief, because I had finally voiced my truth without caving to guilt. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went for a walk downtown alone. I passed shops I had always wanted to step into. I wandered into a bookstore and bought 3 novels that had been recommended in the support group. I stopped at a cafe and ordered an expensive dessert simply because I felt like it. As I sat there savoring a piece of chocolate cake without calculating its cost, I realized something profound. I could spend money on myself without guilt. I could make choices about my own life without justifying them to anyone. For the first time in decades, I felt free. That night, I sat in my living room, reading one of those novels with a cup of hot tea. The phone rang. I let it go to voicemail, but then I heard a voice that made me get up immediately. "Grandpa, it's Maya, the older Maya, your great niece. I wanted to ask how the support group went, and I'd like to invite you to dinner on Saturday. Dad is cooking, and I think he'd really like to know you better." For the first time in weeks, I smiled, a genuine smile. I had lost a toxic bond with my daughter, but in return I had gained something I didn't even know I was missing. An authentic connection with family who valued me for who I was, not for what I could provide. "I'd love that," I replied when my great niece invited me, and as the words left my mouth, I felt a new version of myself beginning to take root. 6 months after the incident at the bank in Brooklyn, I woke up in a room I didn't recognize at first. The curtains were unfamiliar. The morning light came in at a different angle, and the air smelled faintly of jasmine instead of the stale perfume of sorrow that had hung over my house for years. Then I remembered where I was, Tuscany, in a small bed and breakfast I had booked for my first solo trip abroad. It was my great niece, Maya, who had planted the seed. She had become a steady and healing presence in my life. One evening over dinner, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Uncle Marcus, you've spent 70 years living for others. It's time you lived for yourself." She pulled out her laptop, showing me pictures of Italian towns, open markets bursting with flowers, vineyards rolling across the horizon. "Wouldn't you like to see the world with your own eyes?" At first, the idea seemed absurd. Men like me didn't fly off to Europe alone. Men like me stayed home, solving other people's problems, waiting for life to reward them with scraps of peace. But then I remembered what I had learned in the support group. Limiting beliefs are chains we put on ourselves, so I booked the trip. I applied for a passport, bought new luggage and sturdy walking shoes. When Tiana found out, she called in a fury. "You're spending your retirement money on a trip to Europe," she shouted. "Dad, that money should be for emergencies. What if you get sick? What if you need expensive care?" "Tiana," I replied with a calmness that even surprised me. "I have insurance. I have savings for real emergencies. And after 40 years of working and saving, I deserve to spend some of it on my own happiness. What about us? What if we need help while you're gone?" "Then you'll do what every responsible adult does. You'll handle it yourselves." I hung up without another word. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. Now, sitting on the terrace of that little inn with a cup of strong Italian coffee and a warm cornetto, I thought back to that conversation and smiled. Below me stretched a green valley dotted with olive trees centuries old. In the distance, travelers were beginning their morning walks. Some were young couples, others families. But there were also men and women my age, traveling alone, their faces bright with freedom. My phone buzzed. For a moment, my chest tightened, expecting another one of Tiana's guilt-laden emergencies. But it was Maya, the older Maya. "How's the Italian adventure? Send pictures," she wrote with a trail of hearts. I snapped a photo of the valley and replied, "It's more beautiful than I imagined. I feel like a completely new man." Her response came instantly, "You're not. You're finally the man you always were. You just never allowed yourself to be." Her words stayed with me as I walked into the village along cobblestone streets. I thought of all the changes in those months. After the confrontation with Tiana, I had expected emptiness. After all, for so long my identity had been wrapped up in being indispensable, in being the one who always fixed things. But instead of emptiness, I found space. Space to discover that I liked not having to please anyone. Space to form new friendships with people who valued me for my humor and perspective, not my wallet. Space to awaken parts of myself I had buried for decades. At the support group, I had befriended Alina, a 75-year-old woman who had endured something similar with her own son. Together, we started taking painting classes at the community center, where I discovered a hidden talent for landscapes. I had also begun volunteering at a shelter for women escaping abuse, work that was hard but profoundly rewarding. For the first time in my life, I was helping others from a place of strength, not codependency. And most surprising of all, my finances had never been healthier. Without the constant drain of Tiana and Darius's demands, I had managed to build a real emergency fund. For the first time in decades, I was living my own life, and I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I had been able to invest part of my savings, and I could finally afford small luxuries like this trip without worrying about what the future might hold. One evening, as I was shopping for fresh ingredients to cook dinner in the little kitchen of my room, I received an unexpected call. It was Mr. Alvarez, the bank manager who had stepped in on that terrible day in Brooklyn, the day that already felt like a different lifetime. "Mr. Bennett," he said warmly, his voice steady and professional, "I hope you don't mind me reaching out while you're on vacation. I got your number through Maya, your great niece. There's something I thought you should know." My chest tightened. "What kind of news?" "Tiana and Darius came to the bank last week. They tried to access a joint account you apparently shared with them years ago, an account that still had alerts placed on it after the incident." I frowned, not recalling any such account. "Go on." "About 3 years ago, when you were caring for your late wife during her illness, Tiana persuaded you to add her name to one of your savings accounts in case of emergencies. Do you remember that?" Vaguely, I did. In those confused and exhausting days, Tiana had insisted on helping me organize finances. At the time, I trusted her without hesitation. "That account held $12,000, Mr. Alvarez continued. "They tried to withdraw every cent, but our system blocked the transaction and alerted me. When I explained that no money could move without your direct authorization, they became aggressive. We had to involve security. $12,000. Money I had forgotten even existed. Money Tiana must have been waiting to seize when the moment was right. That day in the bank had not been their first attempt. It had only been their most desperate. "What did we do with the account?" I asked quietly. "We've transferred it fully to your name and removed all other signatories. The funds are safe now." After hanging up, I sat on the small terrace of my room, watching the Tuscan sunset spill orange and pink across the sky. 12,000 more dollars. Not money to be hoarded in fear, but money I could use for travel, for painting classes, for causes I cared about. Money I could finally enjoy without guilt, because I had learned a truth I once thought impossible. I deserved to spend it on my own happiness. The next morning, my final day in Tuscany, I walked to a small cafe in the village square. With my journal open before me, I wrote words that marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. "Today, I don't need permission to live. I don't need to justify my happiness or apologize for taking care of myself. I spent 70 years paying to be loved, but I have discovered that true love is priceless. More importantly, I have learned to love myself." I closed the journal and looked around. The sun lit the old stones, travelers laughed in languages I couldn't understand, and I felt exactly where I was meant to be, free, at peace, finally living for myself. It wasn't revenge, it was liberation. 2 years after that trip to Italy, I woke up in a home I didn't recognize for a moment. A small cottage with a garden I had bought in a quiet neighborhood across town, 6 months after returning from Europe. I sold the old house where my late wife and I had spent 40 years. It held too many shadows, too many reminders of the man I used to be. This new home was mine, chosen, decorated, and filled only with my own presence. That Saturday morning, as I brewed coffee in the kitchen, the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw a familiar figure on the porch, Maya, but not the little girl of 8 who lived so vividly in my memories. She was taller now, thinner, more grown. 11 years old, seeing her there alone made my heart skip. I opened the door slowly. "Hi, Grandpa," she said, her voice carrying a maturity I hadn't noticed before. "Can I come in? I have something important to tell you." I let her in, fighting to steady the mix of joy and anxiety inside me. "How did you find me, sweetheart? Do your parents know you're here?" "Aunt Ruth gave me your address," Maya replied as she settled into the sofa like she had been visiting all her life. "And no, Mommy doesn't know. I told her I was going to Maria's house." She looked different, not just older and taller, but with something new in her eyes, a seriousness, a determination, something that reminded me painfully of the man I had become in recent years. "Maya," I said, lowering myself into the chair across from her. "Tell me what's going on." "Grandpa," she said, her green eyes locking onto mine with a weight beyond her years. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth. Is it true that Mommy and Daddy tried to steal money from you at the bank?" Her question landed like a punch straight to my chest. For 2 years I had rehearsed this moment in my mind, carefully preparing what I might say if Maya ever asked. Yet sitting across from me now, her gaze direct and unwavering, every prepared word vanished. "Who told you that?" I asked, stalling for time. "No one told me directly," Maya replied, "but I've been listening. For 2 years I've overheard the fights, the phone calls, the comments they thought I wouldn't understand." She paused, then added quietly, "And I also found some of the letters you wrote me. Mommy had hidden them in her closet. My letters. For 2 years I had written one each month, simple notes telling her I loved her, assuring her that the problems between the adults weren't her fault, and that I hoped one day we'd be together again. I never knew if Tiana had passed them on." "What did the letters say, Maya?" I asked. "They said you loved me. They said it wasn't my fault we didn't see each other. They said you hoped someday we could be together again." Her voice wavered. "Why did Mommy lie to me? Why did she say you didn't care about our family anymore?" I drew a deep breath. This was the moment of truth, the one I had both dreaded and longed for. "Maya," I said gently, "your mom and I had serious problems about money. Adult problems that weren't easy to solve. But is it true they tried to take all your money?" She pressed, her green eyes locked on mine. I looked straight back at her. Maya was only 11, but she had grown up in the middle of all this. She deserved honesty measured for her age, but honest nonetheless. "Yes, my love," I said quietly. "It's true." She nodded slowly, as though my confirmation had given her the final piece of a puzzle she had been assembling for years. "That's why you don't live in the old house anymore. That's why you don't give us money for special things anymore. That's why Mommy gets upset whenever someone says your name. How do you feel knowing all this?" I asked softly. Maya thought for a moment. "Confused," she admitted, "because I love Mommy and Daddy, but I also know what they did was wrong, and it makes me sad that you've been all alone this whole time." "I haven't been alone, Maya," I told her. And it was the truth. I've been learning to take care of myself. I've made new friends. In fact, I've been happier these past 2 years than I had been in a long time. I showed her some of the paintings I had done in my art classes, and her eyes lit up with recognition from photos she'd seen online. I told her about volunteering, about the friendships I had built, about the new life I was shaping. "Grandpa," she said finally, "when I'm 18 and can make my own decisions, I want to have a relationship with you, a real relationship, not like before." "What do you mean, not like before?" "Before, when I came to visit, it always felt strange. Like Mommy wanted me to ask you for things, or like the visits had a purpose I didn't understand." Maya's words carried a wisdom beyond her years. "I want to visit you just because I like being with you. I want to know the real you, not just the grandpa who gives gifts." We embraced for a long time. And in that hug I felt something I hadn't felt in years, genuine hope. Maya stayed for 2 more hours. We walked through my garden where I showed her the flowers and herbs I had planted. We baked cookies together, and she told me about school, her new interests, the book she was reading. When it was time for her to leave, she hugged me tightly again. "Grandpa, can I ask you a favor?" "Of course, sweetheart. Can you keep writing me letters? But now that I know where you live, you can send them directly to me. You can send them to Maria's house, and she'll give them to me." I promised her I would. Then I watched her pedal away on her bicycle, determination in every stroke, carrying with her a new understanding of the truth. That night, I sat in my garden with a cup of tea and my journal. I wrote, "Today my granddaughter found me, not the manipulated child I once knew, but a brave young girl who sought the truth for herself. In her, I see hope, that real love can outlive lies, that genuine relationships can grow even after years of damage." I closed the journal and lifted my eyes to the stars. For the first time in my life, the future felt wide open, not an endless list of obligations, but a horizon of possibilities. I was 71 years old, and at last I was learning how to live.